right, today I want to talk about PG&E's recent filing for bankruptcy as the result of the 2017 California wildfires. Apparently 17 of the 21 wildfires were caused by PG&E equipment, or helped spark the 17 of the 21 fires. I'm not sure if they had any role to play in the 2018 fires, which I'm sure they do, but in 2019, they're claiming that they're now insolvent as a result of the lawsuits and litigation against them, which is now causing them to file for bankruptcy. Other than the fact that PG&E is one of Northern California's largest utility companies, it also reminded me of Enron and the Enron scandal, when Enron went bankrupt as a result of the 1990s deregulation of energy and power. So there's some interesting parallels between PG&E and Enron. In Enron's case, they were a Texas-based power company that had a long history of like 50, 70, 100 years of operation. And they were initially a municipality that was created to regulate and generate electricity for the Texas power. But in the 1990s, there was a lot of talk around, as a result of Reaganomics and free markets regulating themselves or deregulating free markets so that the free market can run wild and do its. The free marketers that were arguing for this were saying that this would somehow reduce the cost of electricity by creating competition, because apparently the government created all these rules and regulations that caused the market to slow down or to kill competition and therefore increase the price of electricity, or that this was somehow getting in the way of these power companies from, somehow performing better for the public. But in the reality, that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, most municipalities 100 years ago were created because the fact that capitalism is not necessarily always good for your average person, meaning that if you say like you had water, right, and you let the power and water companies charge market rates for power and water, they're going to bid the price up. They're not going to bid the price down, because they're going to seek profits. They're a profit-seeking entity if they're private sector. But because people need water and need electricity, they're going to pay whatever the cost is. And if they keep jacking up the price, or if they have a monopoly on it, or if the 2 or 3 companies that are available collude together to artificially keep the price high, people will still have to pay it. And so this is bad for people. We knew about this like 100-something years ago, why monopolies are not good for democracies or the general welfare of the people. So they created municipalities saying like, okay, well, we'll grant this utility company a monopoly, such as PG&E in Northern California, Edison Electric in Southern California, Enron in Texas. Hey, you guys we're going to give you a monopoly. You're going to be guaranteed payments. Here's your startup cash. Here's whatever it takes to get the operation going. And yes, you can charge the customers, the people consuming your power, a price in order to keep the operation going. But no, you're not here for profits. You're not here to seek profit. You don't have any shareholders that you owe money to. So in exchange for the monopoly, you have to sell electricity at cost or near cost, right? Maybe a little bit more for maintenance of like power grids, power lines, maintenance for workers, pensions, healthcare benefits for the workers, so that it's a two-way street where the people get clean water, clean electricity. The people that are operating the business will have decent pensions, decent pay, decent everything, and will be basically taken care of by performing this public good. However, these are corporations, extensions of the government essentially, i.e. municipalities, filled with people that can be greedy. In the 90s, there was the deregulation, meaning that they wanted to reduce the oversight that government had over the utilities so that the utilities can start to seek profit. So Edison Electric, PG&E, Enron, everybody dealing with energy essentially started seeking profit, started to try to increase their market share or compete with one another for electricity, which was by design. If you were to go watch the Enron documentary, they could tell you in a very entertaining way why that didn't work, where essentially they started, rather than compete with each other, they would withhold the electricity that they were providing to the power grid, which would then artificially increase the price of electricity, which would then increase their profits because they would have to render less energy but make more money for the same amount of kilowatt hours. And all they would have to do is withhold electricity artificially, which would then cause the remaining supply of electricity to go up per kilowatt hour, which would then start to bankrupt different cities, counties, states. State of California apparently was held hostage. Massive blackouts, brownouts would happen. Hospitals would go without electricity that might have babies on incubators, or old people on ventilators, or elementary schools that were overheating due to temperature, California heat, they needed their air conditioning. Or if it was different places, it might be freezing. You need the electricity when you need the electricity, hence why we had the municipalities. But if you artificially withheld the energy, the cost would go up, and then you can start negotiating for long-term rates at a higher rate. I think historically, the price of electricity for like the last 100 years, before the 2000s or before the 1990s deregulation, was 1 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour. When Enron scandal hit in 2000 and 2001, and the results of the California blackouts and all that, the energy went up to as high as 5 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour. That was enough to create a grand investigation, impeach a Governor Gray Davis, who was running for office, who wanted to run for the presidency after George Bush, but instead was replaced by Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people, as that governor. And Kent Lay, from the CEO of Enron, was sent in prison along with, I think, was the process. They started trying to put people in prison over 5 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour. At the end of that movie, you would feel like, oh wow, justice was served and everything went back to normal. Except it didn't. Because if you look at PG&E's cost of electricity per kilowatt hour in the year 2013, just before the Daly City explosion, or the mill break, before the explosion, was something like 24 cents per kilowatt hour. So only 10 short years after the Enron scandal, the price of energy didn't go back to 1 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour. It didn't stay at 5 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which was a scandal to put CEOs in jail and to bankrupt a whole company and remove a governor. Instead, it went up to 24 cents per kilowatt hour. 24 cents per kilowatt hour, and nobody went to jail over that. Why? Did everyone become complacent? Did everyone forget about it? I think the answer is all of the above. I think as the result of the 2006, 7, and 8 credit crisis, which led to a depression/recession, there was other things that were going on that caused people not to pay attention to their power bill. Plus, California was also trying to put out incentives for homeowners to buy solar panels in addition to the using just your PG&E. So suddenly you're being pushed to buy like $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of solar panels in the year 2007 or 8 if you were in a house, while your cost of electricity went from 8 cents or 10 cents or 12 cents per kilowatt hour up to 24 cents per kilowatt hour. So then when you start doing the math, you're like, oh wow, I'm paying 24 cents per kilowatt hour to use electricity from PG&E, but I can go buy solar panels for $40,000 or $30,000 at the time that would supposedly offset the cost of your PG&E bill, your electricity bill. Meaning that if they gave you a loan for $40,000, you get like $5,000 off as a tax credit from California. You put it on your roof, and then you drag that out over a 10, 15, 20 year period. Hopefully your monthly payment would be $300 or less. So if your utility bill was $300, they're trying to put so much solar panel on your roof to offset your utility bill. Now, if your utility bill was at 1 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour, your utility bill would probably be like $50 to $100 a month. Most, right? At 5 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour, it might be 100 plus. At 24 cents per kilowatt hour, you're easily pushing $300, $200 to $300 for like a 2,500 square foot house, for instance. So I think what happened was there was a full court press to push green energy, to push solar power onto the California consumer, meaning that PG&E's financial arm was investing in Solar City. California was taking its talking points from the Democrats like Al Gore, who was an outspoken advocate for global warming or climate change or green energy, where he wanted California to move over to, not just California, but the United States to move to renewable energies and get off of fossil fuels like coal, for instance. And one way to do that was through solar panel subsidies, wind farms, and etc., which is fine, except if the math doesn't work, then people aren't going to do it. If the economics don't work out, then people can't or won't do it. So if you make energy expensive from PG&E, then you can push the consumer to go buy the solar panels. You can also market the solar panels as a clean alternative to coal or clean alternative to oil or nuclear power plants. So I remember in like 2013, so something like 12 to 24 houses just blew up south of San Francisco. And PG&E said, oh, wow, this is due to lack of maintenance, even though we're sitting at like 24 cents per kilowatt hour. So then they said, oh, no, these lines weren't being properly maintained, even though they've been there for like 100 years, even though you were supposed to be maintaining it, hence why you were charging money for your services for the past 100 years. Yeah, you should have had money to deal with this. Why are you saying? And by the way, you've had a massive increase in prices from 1 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour, or 5 to 8 cents per kilowatt hour, to 24 cents per kilowatt hour over the previous decade or two. So why are you all of a sudden saying that you don't have any money to do maintenance? Like, that seems crazy. And the fact that there was a giant fireball in Daly City, where I remember even just being on the 580 driving from South Bay, right? Like, this is in the North Bay where this explosion, and seeing the explosion from the South Bay, which is massive, and then hearing about it for a week or two. But now they're saying, okay, well, because of that, we now need to increase our rates to 36 cents per kilowatt hour. Oh, by the way, if you don't like 36 cents per kilowatt hour, there's this company called Solar City, and then there's a whole bunch of other, startups that were trying to install solar panels, which could have been from Solar City, could have been a different company, it didn't really matter. They were trying to say, okay, well, I see that your utility bill is now 36 cents per kilowatt hour. You must be spending $100 to $300 a month just on electricity, especially in the summer. And if you're like sweating the summer out because you can't afford the extra, couple $100 every month for your power bill, then you might be really tempted to go ahead and go, you know what, give me that $30,000-$40,000 loan to buy the solar panels, and hopefully this will save me some money, right? But it wouldn't work if you had cheap electricity. The only way this scheme works is if you had expensive electricity. The rest of the country does not have 36 cents per kilowatt hour. Like, I remember even working at GE, General Electric, and people wanted or started buying Teslas, and GE said, well, we have these fancy LM6000s. Basically, it converts natural gas into electricity. So we'll just install one in the parking lot, and then we'll put out like 20 or 30, electrical outlets for electric cars to charge their batteries for free, by the way. And that natural gas converting into electricity only cost them something like 6 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour. Something really cheap. And that was only because natural gas was a little bit more expensive than it used to be. Electricity was cheaper than natural gas, but now natural gas is cheaper than electricity. And so why is GE, General Electric, able to provide for its 2,000 plus software engineers in the heart of Silicon Valley or the East Bay, 6 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour, but PG&E can't do it for less than 36 cents per kilowatt hour? Something's bogus here. Those numbers do not add up. Because, by the way, PG&E buys a lot of GE LM6000s or GE turbines to convert natural gas into electricity on behalf of the utility for the California consumer. So they used the Daly City explosion as an excuse to increase the cost of electricity from 24 cents per kilowatt hour to 36 cents per kilowatt hour. Then in 2019, as the result of the 2017 wildfires, they're now declaring bankruptcy. Now, obviously, you can't let the utility company go bankrupt, but you are now going to have to start looking into what was going on here. How was this thing being operated? Why wasn't there maintenance being done? Why is all of a sudden, after 100 plus years of operation, it can't maintain its equipment, and that equipment is now supposedly starting wildfires statewide? Yeah, right. Give me a break. Could there have been some malfunction and some maintenance required? Sure. But I'm not buying that California can't produce electricity any cheaper than Arizona or Nevada or Texas or any of the middle states. This is outrageous. Like, something that's clearly going on. And part of it, I think, was that the PG&E's financial arm was investing heavily, along with Google and friends, into Solar City. And as California was pushing onto the consumer, or the taxpayers / consumer, solar panels, which was supposed to go along the green energy movement, or to be environmentally friendly, to reduce carbon dioxide in the air. And even the California wildfires, they were claiming, oh, this is due to climate change, and this is the result of climate change or global warming. It's causing greater catastrophe, greater weather events like fire, but not really. That had more to do with the fact that the environmentalists were refusing to allow the fire department to cut down the surrounding shrubs, right? Or to clear the underbrush that quickly catches on fire. Because actual redwoods are fire resistant. Like the sap in its bark has fire retardant elements in it. So, in fact, their seeds don't even begin to grow unless there's a brush fire. So there has to be like a small forest fire before the pine cone opens up, due to the heat, and then uses the newly created soil as fertilizer for it to start growth. And yeah, it's a slow growth, but most of the competition for the sunlight has been removed and the soil's been enriched. And by the way, California is home to the redwoods, which are 1,000, 2,000 years old. I mean, this is as old as Jesus, supposedly. Maybe even older, we don't know. The other claim was that, because of the drought that happened between 2012 and 2016 was the cause of why there was so much dry brush out there, which I think is partially true. But at the same time, we've had rain since 2016 and 17. But we didn't have the fires until 16, 17, 18. Actually, no, we didn't have any in 16. It was 17 and 18 were the two statewide fires back to back. So I'm like, wait, shouldn't that have all been rehydrated if we had the rains come in? Wouldn't it have had the fire somewhere towards the tail end of the 4-year drought, instead of like a year or two after the drought was over and after the rains had come several times? Like, that doesn't seem like it's adding up either. And by the way, I can't believe how many wind turbines I've been seeing put up all over California, but it's like tens of thousands of ginormous, 10-story tall wind turbines have been installed. And yet they're still saying, oh no, we can't produce electricity cheaper than 36 cents per kilowatt hour. Oh, and by the way, PG&E is going bankrupt, so guess what? We're going to have to revive it, and it's going to be more like 40 or 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Even though we still have wind turbines, the wind didn't stop blowing. We have all these solar panels, like we have more solar panels installed on people's houses than ever. The sun didn't stop shining. Shouldn't the cost of power be going down and not up? Like, what's really going on here? I'm not buying this whole notion that we can't solve the energy problem. Even Elon Musk, who owns Tesla and was an early investor in SolarCity when Tesla bought SolarCity, has a complete solution for transportation, where you now have solar panels on the roof plus battery packs in the garage, which then can capture the daylight hours of sunlight and convert it into electricity and store it as a battery, and then charge your car up at night, or even power your house for days or if not a week. Recently they did in Australia, inserted large power packs or Tesla batteries to cache electricity in between peak usage between coal, wind, and whatever. And so then this would make it so that you didn't need to fire a bunch of coal plants 24/7. It meant that, well, when the wind's blowing, store the energy, and when those batteries are less than 20% full, then you fire up the coal factories to fill them back up, and that could make it so that you can plan when you use coal and optimize for wind and solar without having to use coal to baseline their grid. Why can't we do something like that in California, where we have tons of sunlight, lots of wind, we have tons of solar panels everywhere, wind turbines everywhere? Why can't we just install a couple of batteries to cache electricity and stop base loading it with coal and use whatever hydroelectric is coming from Hoover Dam and Niagara Falls, which we had been using for, 100-something years. I mean, Hoover Dam was created in the 1930s. Niagara Falls has been in use since the 1880s or something, since whenever they first started using hydroelectric. So I'm confused as to why electricity keeps climbing up. I think that there's some maliciousness going on where someone is artificially increasing rates in order to extort money out of the California taxpayer. So that is why it reminded me of Enron, because that's essentially what Enron had been doing and was operating and had crashed in a similar amount of time in the 2000s, but it's somewhere in the 2000 to 2013 timeframe, PG&E started to rapidly increase its power rates and is now bankrupt as a result of the wildfires in 2019. So I think it's time to review what is going on at PG&E and probably Edison Electric in Southern California and see why is electricity rapidly growing when it should be shrinking.